What's going on, guys? Jacob here, and today we are going to discuss program design for hypertrophy and the nuts and bolts of things, what you need to know to effectively design a program that's going to maximize muscle growth. There's a plethora of information available online, many coaches, experts getting into the minutiae and the fine details relating to hypertrophy, and it can be quite confusing. I definitely know that this is something that I experienced for many years, and it's taken me quite a while to wrap my head around how to effectively put together a program that's going to build muscle and how to make sense of everything, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So in designing a program, we are looking to set up a micro cycle, that is a 7-day training period, and what that is going to entail is going to be highly dependent on, number one, your level of advancement, number two, your training availability, so how frequently and how often you're able to go to the gym. So these are important considerations before we look at any of the following programming variables, but just make sure that you are bearing in mind how advanced you are, as well as how often you're able to get to the gym consistently over time, because that's extremely important if muscle growth is our goal. So first and foremost is sound form. You must be training with good technique across all of your lifts, because a failure to do so is simply going to mean that you're not going to put the stimulus from the external load, that is the dumbbells, the barbells, the machines, the cables, onto the target muscle group. So understanding basic mechanics of the lifts that you're performing is really important, and how to perform them is going to be critical to how you then apply the training program. Because if we don't have good technique, we're simply wasting our time. No matter how good your training program is, if you cannot execute the technique correctly on the lifts that you're performing, then you're simply not going to build muscle. So I definitely recommend you do your research and learn how to perform the basic movements required of your program. Let's get into things. The big variable correlated with hypertrophy, as shown in the scientific literature, is volume. Now, I'm going to keep this really simple. 10 or more sets per week per muscle group, distributed across a frequency of 2 to 3 sessions per week per muscle group. And again, this is going to be highly dependent on your training schedule, your level of advancement, and a number of other things. But we want a minimum of 10 sets across 2 to 3 sessions, and we want to be using intensities as measured by intensity load, so how heavy the weight is, of between 60 to 80%. You could go heavier, you could go lighter, provided that volume isn't compromised. And more importantly, we need to be paying attention to intensity of effort, that is our proximity to failure as measured by the RPE scale, or reps in reserve. And this is really important to a hypertrophy program, because no matter how much volume you have, if you are not training with a sufficient intensity or proximity to failure, we're not going to be getting enough training effect from a given set, and you're simply going to spin your wheels. So you need to be making sure that you know how to use the RPE scale and repetitions in reserve, and that's going to mean you have to train hard. You are going to need to learn what it feels like to quiver out of the gym and have your legs shaking, because you'll then realize, what an RPE of 10 on the leg press is when you're almost crushed by the freaking machine. So this is really important, and I cannot state that enough, or emphasize that enough, that you need to learn how to apply effort within your sessions. And obviously this should be scaled according to training age. For beginners, they're probably going to need 50% light to moderate efforts, where they're learning the skill, building self-efficacy and confidence in the gym, and then having 50% of their training where it's a little bit harder, things like machines or single joint exercises. And then as we progress to intermediate, we can have consistently harder training sessions across this 7-day period. And then as we're advanced, we need to have distinctly hard sessions, distinctly light sessions. But nonetheless, you need to learn how to train hard if you want to get big. When it comes to exercise selection, simple rule of thumb, 2 to 3 exercises per muscle group is going to be more than sufficient, provided that we're getting the volume in and we're training that muscle through all of its anatomical functions. For example, the hamstrings, we need to be training them through hip extension, as well as knee flexion, which means we could simply use movements such as the RDL, Romanian deadlift, and the hamstring curl. There's 2 exercises. But more complex joints that have more articulations in terms of where the muscles insert and originate are going to require potentially more exercises, such as the upper back, where we have the lats, the rhomboids, the teres, the rear delts. We might need a few more exercises to target all of the musculature in that muscle group. But for smaller muscle groups such as the bicep and those joints that are very simple in nature, 1 to 2 exercises is going to be more than adequate, and our focus is then on getting sufficient tension through them with good technique. In terms of rest periods, anywhere from 60 seconds and beyond is going to be more than adequate. And again, we want to be making sure that we are resting long enough to uphold sound technique and ensure that we're able to get out all our volume. If our rest is not long enough and we're fatiguing too quickly within a set and we aren't able to complete the desired number of reps or technique breaks down, then we simply need to rest longer. But again, practicality issues arise when we rest for periods longer than 5-10 minutes, and if you're like me, you're busy, you will need to keep track of this, but you should be good to go from anywhere between 2 to 4 minutes, making sure that those key compound lifts, we're saving a little bit more time between your sets to uphold technique and bar speed, whereas those isolation movements and accessory work, we can have a little bit less rest. When it comes to tempo, that is the speed of contraction or the speed at which we lift the weight up and down through space. We want an explosive concentric action to maximize motor unit recruitment and a controlled eccentric, but we don't need to slow it down to something ridiculous like 10 seconds or even 5 seconds. Simply being able to control the weight so that we do get some eccentric loading, as that does elicit some muscle damage, more muscle damage than just simply dropping the weight or the concentric action alone. And there may be an additive effect of causing more muscle damage to hypertrophy, but the jury's out on that one. Making sure that you control it is key, and again, good technique, and even better technique is going to yield the best outcomes. Now, here's the important part. When it comes to progressive overload for hypertrophy, everybody gets very hell-bent on adding sets and volume as a means of building bigger muscles, and whilst this is important, we need to be looking at repetition strength across multiple sets, as opposed to just repetition strength on one set or one lift. We need to be looking across the board at every movement within our program, making sure that we control as many variables as possible and seeing progression on all of our lifts in terms of not only the number of sets we're performing, but also the loads that we're using, the mind-muscle connection that we have within those exercises, as well as our repetition strength, like I said, across all of our sets, not just one set. And this is going to look something like this. If we are doing 3x6 on the squat at 100 kilos and 2x8 on the leg press at 120 kilos, over the course of time, you should be seeing your squat strength increase, doing 3x8 at 100 kilos, and then potentially being able to do 3x12 at 140 kilos on the leg press. This is going to be a pretty good sign that you are seeing some girth in your quads, your lower body in general, as not only has the load gone up, but also the amount of volume that you're performing. And we can get into the details about, whether or not number of sets per week is the primary variable we need to measure for hypertrophy or volume load. But again, you need to be getting stronger across multiple sets, and that is going to be a good proxy for muscle growth. Now, I'm going to leave you with 3 very, very important focus points for your training. And I've banged home about technique, so I'm not going to cover that one any further, but that's number 1, is lifting with timeless form. Number 2 is effort. If you apply sufficient effort to your training, no matter how poorly designed your program is, you will get bigger. And there are a lot of individuals out there and physique enthusiasts who got pretty darn jacked with very suboptimal programs, but they had pretty good technique and a mind-muscle connection that, was akin to Arnie when he was coming, and they learned how to train hard. And I cannot express how important this is if you want to get big. So making sure that you're learning how to push yourself consistently in the gym. And for most of you, you're not going to run into issues about overtraining. And, yes, don't hurt yourself. But if you have good technique, then making sure that you have the effort there is going to be safe. So that's number 2. And number 3 is time. Making sure that you are patient and you do all of the above consistently for years and years on end, and all of a sudden you'll get people on the gram questioning your natty status. So guys, that is the nuts and bolts of program design for hypertrophy. I hope it was useful. If it was, make sure you like the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll speak to you all next time.